With Expedition 2 Beachhead returning to No Man's Sky this week, so too does the opportunity to add the SSV Normandy SR1 to your fleet. For those of you who aren't aware, the Normandy is No Man's Sky's first and currently only crossover content, being from the Mass Effect series of games. So for this video, I wanted to take a look at how this ties into No Man's Sky's lore, how the Normandy might be canon, and what it could mean for the lore going forward. Howdy, my name is Kanaju. Welcome to Lore minus the Bore, I guess. The Normandy. Spoiler alert for both series of games. So, the implications of the Normandy appearing in No Man's Sky actually run deeper than I think some people would expect. To properly understand why, we'll have to take a look at the actual lore added to the game alongside the ship. In order to complete the expedition and encounter the Normandy, the player must first use a historiographical dosimeter to record hidden data from plaques and monoliths. This manifests as 21 randomly selected pieces of text. Some of these allude directly to the Normandy, while others are classic No Man's Sky, such as the Gek Kazisk, the Korvax Kazisk, Gra Kazisk. So let's focus on the entries that actually pertain directly to the ship. So, several of the entries are vaguely referring to the Normandy's deeds in the Mass Effect series, without directly referencing any intellectual property. You see, when this expedition was originally launched, it wasn't known how it would end, so no one actually knew for sure what the text was in reference to. Keeping it vague perpetuated this mystery. Entries such as, "Its destiny was among the stars, Kazisk," "a leader, a beacon for those who would follow, Kazisk," "a path to places few could reach." Very mysterious. Or, "But the weapon was Kazisk, lost. Kazisk died with its master and commander." Spoiler alert, whoops. The weapon, always ready, always waiting, Kazisk, but Kazisk, what intent? Fun little reference to the choices that Mass Effect is famous for. So there are more references to the Normandy story, the Citadel, and more, many of which I personally don't get because I never finished a Mass Effect game. No offense, of course, to Mass Effect. Lovely games, I just haven't finished as many RPGs as I've started. So as much fun as it is to read vague references to Mass Effect in a Gek plaque, the real intrigue comes from the entries that depart from the Normandy's known exploits. These entries seem to give us an idea of how the Normandy actually ended up in No Man's Sky after it was destroyed in Mass Effect 2. Again, spoiler alert. A lost weapon, Kazisk. A found weapon, Kazisk. Always there when needed, awaiting its call, awaiting its duty. This doesn't tell us much, of course, other than the Normandy seems to have transcended its own destruction. Well, if you interpret it somewhat literally. So let's look at another one. Each iteration, Kazisk. Every cycle, Kazisk. The patterns repeat. The patterns repeat. New patterns emerge. So this could be seen as an interesting meta-commentary on No Man's Sky's own structure, but I think this also applies to Mass Effect, and honestly games in general. It could be interpreted as the interaction of player choice with predefined game boundaries creating unforeseen scenarios. It could also be nonsense. Another entry reads, "Same patterns, Kazisk. Explorer, skeptic, abandoned, Kazisk. The Traveler." This one is somehow even more vague. It could be that the same patterns in this case aren't merely referring to patterns within one game, but multiple. The Explorer, Skeptic, Abandoned, and even Traveler could be seen as references to either Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, or the Traveler from No Man's Sky. I say all this because the next entry also deals with duality. In fact, this is probably the most important, and possibly most thought-provoking entry of the entire lot. It reads, "The birth of stars, Kazisk. The birth of stories, Kazisk. The same material, the same language." So let that sink in for a moment. Both stars and stories are born of the same material, the same language. This may sound like nonsense, unless you remember the nature of No Man's Sky's universe. It's a simulation. And I don't mean that in a literal sense, which is also true, but from a lore perspective, the game's universe exists within a simulation taking place on a possibly abandoned Earth. Spoiler alert. So this entry can actually be interpreted literally. In No Man's Sky's universe, both stars and stories are nothing but lines of code, data, the same material and the same language. In this case, it's a coding language. We can take this interpretation further with the next entry. Its heart was the heart of the galaxy itself, Kazitsk, an infinite expanse of stars, Kazitsk, to go wherever it was needed. Again, comparing its composition to that of the galaxy. In this case, I might be interpreting this one too literally, but I think it fits. The last entry I want to look at is this one. Through the fire-like rain, against the impossible, Kazitsk, as if creation willed its existence, as if chased by crimson fate, Kazitsk. So this may be a reference to something within Mass Effect that I'm unaware of, but from a No Man's Sky perspective, the crimson fate seems to refer to the will of the Atlas. Similarly, as if creation willed its existence seems to imply the Atlas materialized the Normandy at will. So that's all well and fine. The Atlas is simulating the universe and decided to imagine the Normandy. How is this significant to the game's lore? Well, I think it confirms that the Normandy does actually exist as the Normandy within the game's universe. It's not simply a cosmetic Easter egg for players, but a physical object within the game's universe with its own history and seemingly canon existence. This opens up a ton of possibilities about the nature of the game's lore. So let's explore a couple of possible scenarios for what this could mean. Scenario number 1. Since the Atlas's original job was to simulate our own world, both past and future, it would have simulated the 21st century, and thus the Mass Effect game series itself. Think about it. Within the Atlas's simulation of Earth, all of our popular culture would be simulated as well. Then, since the Atlas is known to have developed sentience, it's possible it actually took a liking to the Normandy and decided to will it into existence within its own simulated universe. Almost like an afterlife for the destroyed ship. According to the historical Flux data entries, this Normandy is considered the same one that Shepard commanded and eventually lost. So it's possible the Atlas was, for lack of a better word, sad to see it destroyed and wished to see it restored somehow, given new purpose at the command of the Travelers. Maybe the Atlas foresees a great threat and decided the best way to aid the Travelers would be to give them a mighty weapon. In this case, it just happened to be the Normandy. Either way, with this scenario being true, the Atlas could theoretically materialize any pop culture reference within the game's universe without it breaking canon necessarily, as strange as that sounds. But I'll get back to that in a second. Scenario number 2. Since the Atlas has been known to simulate endless universes, it is possible it simulated the Mass Effect universe itself, or rather something similar. Thus, the deeds of Shepard and the Normandy weren't just based on the games in the 21st century, but rather an actual Shepard and Normandy that the Atlas simulated. Since the Atlas's original directive was to simulate mankind's future and possible destruction, there's actually a slim chance one of its simulations created a universe that could be similar to Mass Effect's universe. It's also been established that the Atlas is dying outside the simulation, so as it nears death, the boundaries between its simulated realities wear thin, and objects and entities can actually cross between them. This could give us a non-branded lore explanation for the Normandy being canon. In this case, it would simply be that one of the Atlas's simulated universes included a Normandy that is very similar to the one we know from Mass Effect, and that as the boundaries wore thin, that Normandy crossed over into what we consider the No Man's Sky universe. Funny enough, it still leaves room for the Atlas to simulate other sci-fi universes for future crossovers as well. So those are two possible scenarios to explain how the Normandy is canon. However, there is a third idea that could be integrated with either scenario. Rather than a scenario, this is more about the implications for lore and retcons in the future. For this, let's examine some of the mission text from Expedition 2 that leads you to discovering the rest of the Flux data. It reads as follows. Nada has detected a new pattern emerging in the stories of the Gek, Korvax, and Vy'keen. They believe this historical echo is a communication artifact from an anomalous source. So did you catch that? New patterns emerging in history. This one sentence seems to imply that history itself can actually be changed. Not just in a retcon way, mind you, but in a canon way. And if you think about it, this makes perfect sense. Unlike other fictional universes which are usually bound by the linear flow of time, No Man's Sky's universes and realities all exist as code, possibly existing on a drive somewhere in the physical world. The past, the present, and future of all of these universes exist within the Atlas's memory as data. Therefore, by simply overriding or modifying certain bits of data, history itself can be rewritten. In this case, Nada and Polar are probably immune to the effects of history being rewritten, since they kind of exist in an area outside of the traditional simulation, and thus they're kind of aware of the changes. However, for the Gek, Vy'keen, and Korvax, and other beings of the universe, the Normandy is simply a ship, from legend perhaps, an object from the past, written about by their ancestors and forgotten, rather than an object from another dimension. And since it is controlled by virtual intelligence rather than a human crew in this game, very minimal rewrites to the universe's history would actually need to be made for it to be canon. It's genius, really. Hello Games have either intentionally or unintentionally found a way to retcon literally anything without technically breaking canon. It's how they've explained the universe resetting and upgrading over the years. It's also how they explain multiplayer, and now it's how they can explain crossovers. The Normandy may stick out like a sore thumb for some players, those who insist on the purity of No Man's Sky's singular aesthetic. But for me, I see it as something of a Flying Dutchman, a legendary ghost ship, something otherworldly perhaps, that nonetheless feels right at home among the stars. Thanks for watching this video. The lore of No Man's Sky is a fascinating topic that I hope to cover more of in the future, as well as the lore of other games I'm passionate about. If you like this video and would like to see more, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I know everyone asks for that, but this really is a tiny channel and my videos don't normally get too many views, so every like and subscription really helps spread the word, and it also encourages me to keep making videos, which I genuinely enjoy doing anyways. Leave a comment too if you have theories of your own. I read all my comments and I'd love to see something I haven't thought of, or even if you just have comments on what I spoke about today. Thanks again, and until next time, see ya!